Hey guys, welcome back for another video. Today we are going to be talking about Tala from Shoot Beyblade, or the original Beyblade series, Plastic Gen, whatever you want to call it. So Tala is originally the antagonist of the first season of Beyblade. He makes appearance throughout the run of the original series, and his original name in the Japanese dub is Yuri Ivanov. I will be referring to him as Tala in this video just because that's what I originally grew up with, but today we're going to be going over some of the backstory that most people don't know. So Takao Aoki, the writer and illustrator for the original Beyblade manga, originally wanted to include Tala's backstory since it was one of his favorite characters, and he really tried to push to have that included in the last volume of the Beyblade manga, but it didn't end up happening. So he did end up writing a sort of mini backstory for Tala, and what he originally had planned to be included in that last volume of the manga, he ended up just publishing on his website. So it has been translated. Shout out to Wrote Rosen. So they kind of smoothed out this translation and posted it on the WBO. So we're going to be going over this a little bit and just kind of reading through it. So first off, we've got a little snippet from Takao Aoki about the short story. I'm going to go ahead and read that first, and then we'll get into the backstory. So Tala appeared in the first series of Beyblade as the strongest and final opponent of the main character Tyson. And from the point of the character creation in the summer of 2000, he was one of the characters I liked the most, so I immediately came up with his upbringing and his sad past, along with other ideas. I was thinking of eventually including it in the manga, but I was unable to make that come true. I thought of putting this piece at the end of Volume 12, and in the fall of 2003, I brought images and ideas to the novelist Chachimori Megumi and had it novelized. Unfortunately, due to various reasons, it didn't make it into Volume 12, but I'm happy to be able to publish it here. I'd be delighted if you're able to enjoy the slightly different perspective on the world that is found in the manga. The setting is winter of 1999. And with a fierce sound of impact, the Beyblade that shot up into the air started to crumble into pieces. The Bay battlefield became quiet, as if all the boys who were training, not less than 100, held their breath in unison. What broke the silence was the scream of a boy who had lost his battle, and whose Beyblade was completely destroyed. That scream was soon drowned out by the voices of the other boys. The boy was hunched over on the ground, and when I passed him to pick up the pieces of his Beyblade, he looked up at me. His eyes contained not just the look of defeat, but a strong will to fight. He stood up once more and returned to his training. There was no other choice but to continue to fight and to win. That applied to all of us, including myself. "What are you looking at, Tala?" Boris asked with diffidence. I knew he was behind me. "The snow," I replied, taking the question at face value. "I see," said Boris, before falling silent. Our ears were filled with the roaring sounds of spinning Beyblades and the panting from rigorous exercise on training machines. Ever since I had accepted Volkov's invitation, there wasn't a day when this ceased. Under my eyes spread the harbor of Severodvinski. Beyond the shoreline, the white sea was completely covered in ice, and the snow kept falling unforgivingly. It would be a long time before the snow cleared enough to see the earth. No, it would be better if the earth had never shone. I was entranced by the white snow. I liked this scenery. "Snow is nice," were the words that naturally dropped from my mouth. Boris walked up behind and he nodded slightly. We were not the only ones who felt this way. Most of the boys at the center were probably partial to a world enveloped by snow. It buried everything, and the cold chilled the whole body, but it was impartial, without differentiating between the rich and the poor, nor the happy and the unhappy. It continued to fall. The boys who knew of poverty and unhappiness, who came here to escape from a hard life, couldn't dislike the snow. They knew more than anybody that the snow could bury away their unpleasant memories. Happy memories were not unknown to me. My father was a proud soldier, and my mother was kind, cheerful, and a great cook. Deep within my memories, there was a warm household, and inside there, scenes of laughter, but that was a faint memory. When the country's system changed, my father lost his job as a soldier, and with it his pride and ambition. The only things left for him to hold on to was the glory of the past and reminiscence of the better days. Once a proud soldier, a wonderful husband and father, he immediately drowned himself in alcohol. He would often raise his hand against his wife and his son without reason, and idled in self-pity. And my mother's disappearance from my father's violence became worse. Even so, I stayed by his side. Mother would someday return. Father would eventually become the proud and kind man he used to be. I held these hopes within my heart. That's why I stayed with a father who abused me while demanding I bring him food and alcohol. To live, I had to steal, and it was at this time I met Boris. He came from a similar environment. That's why we met on the streets, and from one look we had a mutual understanding. The both of us tricked and stole from people. We were saved by one another's company, even if there was no signs of improvement during these harsh days. At times my smile returned, but that smile was nothing more than an illusion brought about by a false living. Knowing of our continuous stealing, people kept an eye out for Boris and myself, and on one occasion we were caught in a trap set up by the owner of the butcher shop. We could not escape. Of course, in a poor town, the law did not function. When caught, you did not get handed over to the police, but were trapped in a terrible situation. This seemed to be the end. But when I had given up, Volkov held out a helping hand. Volkov was scouring Russia's land for children who had great athletic abilities to achieve some guy's ambition. I was initially unsure about Volkov's invitation. His purpose was a mystery to me. Meanwhile, my head was fixated on the man who was both depraved and abused, but was still my father, and of my mother whom I still hoped would return. I held on to the faint yet happy memories, but what appeared when I opened my eyes was the dingy stone paving and shoes that had holes, revealing long and filthy toenails. This was reality. Now both Boris and I are here to become stronger, to acquire the world through Beyblading. We're here in this center founded by Volkov. What are you looking at, Yuri? Boris asked the same question once again. With a glance, I examined his face. It was muted, but there was a look of worry. I knew this time that his question wasn't literal. What was going to happen to us from here on out? That's what he wanted to ask, most likely. If we remained here, we wouldn't starve or shiver from the cold. We could sleep peacefully, compared to all that had happened. This was heaven. But that was if we could remain strong. Just under 1,000 children were training to become the world's strongest blader. Once they lost, it was over. Every day we saw those who had just been evicted from the center. Boris was worried, not knowing when the days of fighting and training would end. The days of training and the pressure to win. But I didn't share this uncertainty. I knew losing was impossible because I was stronger than anyone. So what was I looking at? The future, I smiled. To control the world through Beyblading. That was the bright path that stood ahead of me. Isn't that right? Boris nodded, the trace of uncertainty vanishing from his face. So Tala did end up fighting against Tyson in the finale of the first season. I won't spoil it too much in case you guys want to go back and watch it. I do highly recommend it. It's really good. But Tala does end up losing, of course. He has to lose to the main protagonist. But Tyson and Tala and that team sort of become friends from that point forward. And Tala does appear in the later seasons as well, especially in G-Rev. He has a much bigger presence as Kai ends up rejoining the Russian team, forming the Blitzkrieg Boys. And yeah, Tala's a great character. I really like him. He has a really interesting backstory. The whole Russian team I find to be super interesting. Like, they really paint it as sort of a place that you don't really want to be, and a place that most of these bladers are because they have no other option. I don't know. There's a lot of depth to that I don't feel like was maintained in some of the later generations. There's just, you know, a lot put into the backstory and the characters. So yeah, that's it. Let me know what you think, guys. If you knew about this story prior, I'd be interested to know sort of what your thoughts are. If this is your first time hearing it, I'm interested to know what your perspective is of Tala and the Demolition Boys as a whole. Maybe your perspective on Kai changes a little bit. We know Kai's backstory is a little bit different, but they all sort of end up in the same place. So definitely not a place I think most people would want to be. But if you had no other option, I definitely think that any kid in that universe would jump at the opportunity to potentially get out of the situation that they were in. If you guys don't mind hitting that like button, I would appreciate it. And subscribe if you haven't already for future Beyblade content. And I will see you guys in the next one.